Napoleon Hill, as you know, I like to read, but the chapter now is all about failures, and the whole focus is it's a temporary failure, right? It's not a long-term failure. He talks about it almost as a superpower. Like, if you haven't failed, you haven't done anything. And he's talking then how failure is a bad word in society back then. And he goes, and back then he's writing saying, it shouldn't be. I don't know why people think it is. Like, think of Edison, Ford, pick somebody back in the day. You know how many failures they've had to get to that one moment, right? Elon Musk today, how many rockets get blown up before you get to that one moment, right? So it's just, to me, again, I'm not trying to fail. Of course, that's a different conversation, but it's part of the process.
Hey guys, welcome back to Mic'd Up. I'm your host, Mike DiCioccio, and today we have him back in action on the show, my co-host, Dave Ragosa. Welcome back to the show.
What's up, Mikey? Glad to be back. Excited.
You've been MIA for a little while, and I'm sure a lot of our regular audience is like, what happened to Dave? He was there for a few episodes. I know you've been busy. You and I keep in touch every week or every other week. I know what you have going on. Why don't you share with our audience where you've been, what you've been doing? I mean, you got a lot of cool updates that you can share.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And I'll start with just been busy doing life and doing work, right? And kind of building. So I've been traveling a lot. This is kind of for those who are in business, you know, most businesses have conferences and different trade shows. And this is kind of our season for the franchise world. So a lot of franchise specific conferences out there. So been hitting the Vegas Strip for the past 6-7 weeks. With different various conferences, had a few other new restaurants getting built as well. So a lot of real estate tours and kind of doing all that fun stuff. So, but just been on the road, I would say, for the last 8 weeks. So happy to be back.
Yeah, those conferences are fun, but they take a lot out of you. Like, by the time you get there, you were telling me about the Vegas one where, like, you didn't really have much time to enjoy it. You were there, you met some great people. It was a great event. But it's not like you spent a couple hours playing blackjack. Like you were in and out of meetings and
zero hours playing anything.
0 minutes. Yeah, at the craps table, which is good because then you came out even. So pretend you played and you didn't lose anything. What do you love most about those conferences? Like, why are they a necessity you're in the franchise space? Like those expos and conferences and meeting people, like, I know it does a lot for you. Can you share? Because there's a lot of people tuning in that are entrepreneurs that are also connected to franchising or maybe considering what franchising would look like.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost is networking, right? So regardless if you're the newbie kind of coming onto the scene, Mike, or if you've been there for 20 years like I have, it's constant networking, constant building relationships. And you can only build those relationships, right, when you're in front of folks. So I think first and foremost, it is that crucial and is that important. For me, I always say the prep work, Mike, leading up to the conference is the most important thing. So typically when I'm at conference, I'm packed from the moment the plane hits the ground to the moment I'm back home, flying back home East Coast. Is I try to be as productive as possible. Building relationships with existing franchisees, vendors, folks in the finance world that help obviously franchisees and franchisors continue to grow and build their business. So if you're an existing franchisor, if you've been in the business for years as a franchisee, if you're a newbie in there, all those things are crucial for you to continue succeeding, in this space, in this business. And then there's always you hear me always say it on the podcast, Mike, it's the one nugget, right? So I'm always kind of every day I'm like, all right, let me learn one nugget today from a conference, from a conversation, from meeting somebody. So that to me is the most important thing, is the crucial thing out there. I will tell you, as most folks, as they come up in the business, get fat and lazy. I got fat and lazy, and there was probably like a 4-year window where I didn't go to any conference. I thought my, excuse my French, but my what didn't stink. And, I thought I was doing everything right. And I didn't go to any conference. I was like, I'm good. I know it all. And it's amazing, since I've changed my mindset, and this was several years ago, of course, and kind of gone back into it. There's just so much to learn there. And even the new stuff. And I will tell you the last point, Mike, and I'll open up to you, is the technology side of it, right? So a lot of the conferences, even though we're in the franchise world, and you can be in health and fitness, you can be in restaurant space, it doesn't matter what business you're in. it's all about AI right now, right? And how can you incorporate AI into your business from a sales perspective, from a guest experience perspective? And I'm learning, right? That's something new for me. I didn't grow up with that. So as I'm going through this, I'm learning it. And you got to be around it to learn it. So there's only so much I can learn on YouTube, but sitting down with some really, wicked smart people that are way smarter than I am about that and how do I incorporate that into the business, right, is crucial.
Yeah, I think that's huge. Being around great people, but it has an energy behind it. People have energy.
For sure.
Those events have high energy. It's planned for many, many months, and there's a lot of people and a lot of money put into it. And so when you go to those, sometimes the downside of it, and this isn't so much for like an expo, but sometimes like my experience with the downside of some of those events is they have like a great guest speaker or something, and a lot of the company, people go and they all show up and there's this great speech, and then on Monday, the companies go back and do the same thing. It doesn't matter what the person said. That's kind of the downside and that I've seen my personal experience. But what you're talking about is control what you can't control. You're meeting the right people. You don't know who it is. The guy sitting next to you at the table having lunch might be someone that can turn into a client for you, but it could just be someone who you learn from, you become friends with, they support you. And that's a super valuable connection. It doesn't always have to be like black and white, this turned into a sale. It's your personal development, right?
For sure. And let me give you a perfect example of that, Mike. So I was at a trade show last year, bumped into a multi-unit franchisee. He's got 40 plus different QSR fast casual restaurants in the restaurant space. From New Jersey. I know most of the folks from Jersey. I don't know everybody, of course, but he's from New Jersey. We start talking.
You know Tony, right?
I know Tony.
Okay.
We start talking, right? And as we're going through the conversation, this is how crazy it is, Mike. Not only is he a multi-unit franchise business owner, he lives in New Jersey. He lives in my town, Mike. So he lives in my town, right? And our boys play baseball together on a high school team.
That's
right?
insane. And
that
where
is
did you meet him?
complete at a trade show in Vegas. That is completely insane. Right.
Yeah.
And we're sitting at the bar and we're talking. And I'm like, wait, where are you from? Wait, what town are you from?
It's got to be a one in multiple million chance that you meet somebody from your hometown like that.
But let me fast forward. A year later, he is now a franchisee of ours. Right. So
that's awesome.
Right. Just a connection of like, hey, I didn't even know. I think I'm the only guy in my town. Right. And those are the learnings that you look back like, wait, there's actually probably some really smart folks in my town that are doing what I'm doing. I'm not even thinking about like, like Mike, you sit in your hometown, I should say, and you think like, you're the guy, and it's like, no, there's other guys that are actually doing, I'll say better than you, but are doing really well or can help you and so forth. And that's, again, it goes back to networking, but that's how crazy it is. And like, if I never went to that show, I never would have met this guy. Yeah,
that's awesome. And again, it's more opportunities. You're putting yourself out there. More people can approach you, right? You got to be approachable.
For sure.
I've had times when I go and you got to be in the zone, right? Where you're ready to meet as many people as you can. Sometimes if you're not in that, you're not in the right mindset. So you got to get yourself ready to go, because if you're invested in traveling across the country, it's go time. And so whatever personal stuff's going on, you got to really put it aside, because you got to be in the zone for the other 100%. People.
Preparation, right? It's all about the prep.
Yeah. And there's people who can benefit from learning from you. And if you're not in the zone, there's a missed opportunity for both parties. So
for sure,
something that you've been doing a great job with Ford's Garage, and I see, it's really cool stories of new locations opening, and a lot of great marketing going on behind the brand. Give some of your personal insights into the marketing, in particular in the restaurant industry. Any personal takeaways that you see that are really working well right now in 2025?
I would say, first and foremost, it has to be localized, right? So no matter what you're doing, if you're on TikTok, Meta, Instagram, pick a platform, videos win. You have to keep it local, right? So even on a national perspective, you think of Ford Motor Company, which we are official licensee of. You think of Ford's Garage, national brand. We're in over 8 different states. You still have to keep it localized and that local flavor and that local video. So I think what has resonated, and I want to say not just for the restaurant space, but I think in general in businesses, is putting some really fun video out there, keeping it local and a local flavor to your community, so folks see local kind of folks in the community, I think is key. I think at any point, if you can tie it into some community outreach programs, like a first responders and so forth, and you can give back to the community while you're doing that, I think it only helps, again, kind of solidify that we are a community business, right? Again, it doesn't matter if you're a restaurant, if you're in a service business, you want to have that connection. But I think utilizing that marketing in that space, I think is key. I think what I am seeing, Mike, in our industry certainly is people know when you're selling them, right? And you're being too, your ad is too much of a corporate ad, if you will, right? So there's a fine line where you need to have that corporate branding, that corporate message out. But I tell all our franchisees, you got to have the local flavor and the local level. So obviously you are working with our marketing team, but it's you guys out there, right? Pounding the pavement, having the conversations with the guests, and doing so.
So just not a generic ad, like it's going to look different in Texas than it would in Jersey or, New York or Florida. I mean,
exactly.
I know you're traveling to Florida quite a bit, which is a nice little perk in the middle of the winter.
For sure. But that's a perfect example. If I could, that's a perfect example. In the past, we didn't know that, right? So full transparency, we don't know it all. But in the past, when I'd say about 10 years ago, we would do ads, images, videos in the Northeast, and it's snow out, or you're in a jacket and you're cold, and you're pushing that ad out to a business in Florida. People kind of just scroll past that ad, right? Because like, wait a second, a dude's in a sweatshirt, I'm in 80 degree in Florida. It just, to your point, right? That's a great example, Mike. It just doesn't resonate. So like being very localized is key.
It's got to be geo-targeted, right? Is that still a thing? I mean, when I was doing marketing before I got into podcasting, it was like everything on devices. It's like people literally, as you're walking by a restaurant, all of a sudden now it's showing up in your feed because you're geo-targeted. So I'm guessing that's still
relevant, but I'll tell you the one pivot, and it's I'm probably not telling anything that's like a secret, but one pivot is also targeting your competitors. So when someone's looking for your competitor, you're actually pulling up on their feed, which is a little pivot to that. So you can actually track and see who's looking at what brands and how to attach to them.
That's crazy. That's awesome.
So in markets where we have a lot of competitors, we're actually on their feeds, if you will, trying to pull guests on our side.
They're trying to figure out what you're doing right, and you're trying to figure out what they're doing right.
Yep.
What would you explain? Like, I've been to Ford's Garage once or twice, down hanging out with my brother down in Florida. Forget if we went multiple times. Yeah, Wally, shout out. And I really loved it. But to me, it has a personal connection because my dad worked at the Ford stamping plant out in Buffalo. So just being there, seeing the Model Ts, seeing everything, it was cool. Food was great. Service was great. You go to the bathroom. What is it that I forget? That is the sink is a tire?
Correct.
Is that right? And
the
about
urinal is a keg.
Urinal, it's a keg. Okay. Yeah, I remember it. But it was cool. Like, it obviously it feels industrial, and that's the whole point of the restaurant. What would you feel is the magic touch that really is allowing Ford's Garage to just, I mean, you guys are really springboarding here. So what do you think the magic touch is behind it?
It always starts with the people, right? So when I say people, Mike, I would tell you it's the team members that run the restaurants, whether it's corporate or on the franchisee side. I think it's the franchisees. And then it flows through the guests, right? Really making sure that the guest has a great guest experience. So we put a lot of emphasis on team building, team experience, and then the guest experience, of course. So I think that's first and foremost. You got to do the blocking and tackling in business, right? And again, this doesn't, for everyone out there, it doesn't have to be relatable to the restaurant business. You got to have a clean restaurant or a clean business. You got to have good customer service, right? Or I call it guest experience, right? You got to have that. In our space, you have to have a great quality of food. Everyone knows that, right? But it's making sure that what's helpful.
We have a great customer experience. Our food tastes like shit. Come on in.
Exactly, right?
Or we have the best food in the world, but when you walk in, the guy's picking his nose, he's turned around, he's on his phone. There's no, like, you're not going to want to go there either. So
there's no interaction. You're waiting an hour and a half to sit down, right? So that's no different than most businesses. But I think that the secret here is, or the opportunity is being consistent at it and making sure from the top down, like, it is about the guest experience. And when I say guest, let's break it down a little bit. So from my level, my guest is the franchisee. So I got to make sure that our franchisees are supported and have a great experience with us. If you're the franchisee, it's your team member, the employees that run your restaurant. You have to make sure that they have a great guest experience with you. And then that team member has to have a great guest experience with the actual guest coming in who's paying. And I tell everyone all the time when I meet, whether it's a team member, a franchisee, our team, myself, I never forget, Mike, it's the end result, that guest who's coming to the restaurant. They're the ones that are making this whole wheel go around, right? They're the ones who are paying for everyone's salaries and homes and this and that. And don't ever forget that. So when I say guest experience, I want folks to think outside of what kind of their scope of work may be or where your lane is. It really trickles down across.
Multi-levels, yeah, for sure. And
Yep.
So is there something that Ford's does? I don't know if you can give the secret sauce, if you will, but like maybe just talk more in general if you need to. But is there something that you guys do to make sure, like there's more than just secret shoppers out there? What kind of, there's an acronym for it, NPS score, Net Promoter Score? Like
Net Promoter Score, for sure.
How do you follow it or track it?
So we have two things. We have one thing that our core to us is the 147. So it's kind of our beacon in terms of one vision, 4 commitments, and 7 principles, right? So that's the 147. I won't get into all of it on this call. Some of it's kind of the secret sauce of what we do. But we train on that from a corporate perspective and a franchisee perspective to make sure that everything I said earlier, Mike, that folks are getting the best guest experience. The other thing that we're working on this year, which is almost finalized and we're going to roll out to our franchisees, is the hospitality wheel. And when you say hospitality, it's about the guest experience. And you'll keep hearing me say guest, not customer. To me, Mike, a customer is very transactional. A guest is building a relationship. Those are two different things. And
Right.
I hate to say it, and it sounds simple, but most folks are very transactional. Me and you have both been there, right? So I don't knock it, but you think of a fast casual QSR, very transactional. You pull up to we won't name the coffee shops, right? And you're going through drive-through. You're lucky if someone picks up their head and even knows that you're even standing there. Very transactional, right? You're not building a brand. You're not building a great guest experience. At our level, that should never happen, right? So from the moment that person walks into the restaurant to the moment they leave, it has to have a great interaction, a great commitment from our side to make sure that we're putting out that great experience through that. So that to me is part of the secret sauce, and it's got to be teachable and part of your core that you live by.
Yeah, and now you travel from location to location, so restaurant to restaurant, and the idea is with a franchise that's consistent from you're at the, I don't know, is there one in Texas? I'm just going to say there's Texas to you're hanging out in Tampa with my brother smoking a stogie. You go from one to the next, like that level of consistency is super important. So how is that tracked? Because Joe, who owns the Texas location, doesn't know John, who owns the Tampa location, but the obviously a franchise has things to follow. What does that look like to make sure that everybody is consistent?
For sure. It comes down to training. So our team does extensive training before you become a franchisee, during your stages as a franchisee. So while you're a franchisee, we're there to support you in training. We have a ton of SOPs, training videos, modules that we have our folks kind of go through from that perspective. But it goes back to the point or the word I said earlier was consistency. You got to be consistent. So we have to be consistent in pushing that messaging and that training out to that Texas store, to the Florida store, to the New York store, making sure that training is constantly happening and we're supporting and we're backing up what we say from the field, right? So when our folks are in the field, are you backing up, that messaging as an example? So it really starts with the consistency of training. So, I'm not going to bore everyone on the podcast, right? But we have a ton of manuals, videos, and stuff. It's are you using
everybody
it, right?
gets the same thing though, is the idea, right? So
correct. It's duplicatable. Everyone gets the same thing. Are you able to, right? And we always have a saying, again, it goes back to what I'm saying earlier is, we try to train our team, and I try to do the best I can, is that guest experience. So I will give you an example. The way training starts, Mike, is if I go out to Texas and Mike is the franchisee at Texas, I may pick you up at your house. If it's your birthday, I may send you a birthday note and a card. I'm going to go above and beyond what the normal transaction of a relationship is, right? So how do you build a great relationship? It's just reaching out. Me and you are a perfect example. Me and you, met at kind of a networking, right? If you think about it from networking, we became kind of acquaintances. We started building our relationships, but me and you put the effort in, right? There was no podcast that back then, we weren't feeding off each other from a business perspective, but we were pouring into each other just as a relationship. Like, hey, dude, how are you doing? How am I doing?
Yeah.
Right? To me, that's where it starts.
General interest in the other person. Like we wanted to see each other doing well, or how can we help, or just have a good feel for what we're doing, which is which is important. And then there's obviously checks and balances too. From a corporate side, we want to make sure that, Texas and Florida are doing the same thing, and all the other
For
states
sure.
as
And
well.
we have our surveys, so we have teams going out doing evaluations, so restaurant evaluations, and then post that, it's kind of coachable moments, right? So I always say, and I tell our franchisees, that's not a, hey, I got you, you're doing something wrong. It's like, hey, here's a coachable moment. Here are things that we can improve on from an opportunity perspective to get better, right? And that has to be, again, it goes back to the relationship. It has to be the relationship. It can't be adversarial, like, oh crap, corporate's coming, what are they going to find? Like, that should never be. If someone has that philosophy, we as a franchisor and as a business, we're doing something wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely, look, I worked in corporate America. I didn't, the company I worked for, I'm not going to name them in this specific event, but I think most people who tune in and hear me talk about my past know the couple companies I've worked for, and I have a lot of respect for them actually, but I remember there was one of our regionals that would come around and everyone would like give you the heads up. You get the phone call, hey, he's on his way to your store. And then everybody would be like a drill sergeant, like a stick up their butt because he's coming to town and you got to make sure. But like he made it uncomfortable. He could have been.
For sure.
But he wanted to be uncomfortable. Like to the point where one of the best stores in the whole country, performance wise and people wise, and just a great store, great manager. He couldn't find anything wrong. And it's like he was trying to find something wrong on his visit. So he went in the back room and like found in the back corner where the fire extinguisher was. And there's a little bit of dust on it. And so he took points off for that. But like the whole point was, right. He had nothing that he could talk bad about, but that's not, it should be coming from a place of like, rooting someone
support
on for other support. He could have been super excited about the 99 that they got out of 100 and joked about the one, but he just wanted to give them that one thing that they're going to remember for next time. And that's, to me, I never liked the guy. Like I respected him from the standpoint of he's got a position in this company a couple levels higher than I was at the time. And he was the reason I got rehired back at that company. But at the same time, I didn't like the way he operated.
Right.
So not to get off on a tangent, but I wanted to kind of hear from you on what your company does to make sure stuff like that doesn't happen. So I'm curious, how many different locations are there now? Like a couple dozen?
30.
30. Okay. So do the 30 franchisees ever get together? Like, I'm sure there's conferences and stuff for them, and like just affords kind of everyone hangs out and shares notes, right?
For sure. So we do a national conference actually coming up the end of April. We do a national conference that we host for all the franchisees, the vendors. That's another thing, Mike. We bring our vendors, right? Because they're a huge part of what we do as a business, right? And celebrate everyone's hard work, right? It is hard to make money. It's hard to have a business, for sure. If you're successful, let's have fun with it too, right? So we do that on a national, once a year nationally. We do quarterly visits with our folks, our teams out there quarterly with our franchisees. We do director of operations. So director of operations quarterly kind of Zoom call. So in person plus another quarterly kind of Zoom call, kind of get to know each other from that perspective. And then folks kind of obviously talk in between each other, right? So if me and you are franchisees, we're going to connect and say, hey, what's best practices? And we have an internal kind of intranet that has a back end that can do that. So you can communicate on that and say, hey, what's working for you?
Mm-hmm.
Here are some challenges I'm going through in Texas. What is Florida seeing? Or what is, from a pricing perspective or consumer, whatever it is. And we encourage, like, I want folks like, hey, what's best in class? And the earlier point you make, Mike, the way I would flip it is if I went into a store that scored like a 99, I'd be like, high five and fantastic. And I'd say, okay, how do we make you a test store, right? So when we're doing training, maybe you're one of the training, like, let's reward you, right? So we call kind of restaurants that we do training at, right? It's kind of for the system. Let's reward you, right? Let's reward your team. Let's reward your manager. They're doing a great job. How do we get this going?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Looking at it from hey, this is a great example store. We can do more from this, situation than I'm going to walk out of here, slap down whatever their score was and walk out. And
absolutely.
Yeah. Like it's missing the opportunity.
So I was say I want the opportunity. I want to flip the script and pivot and kind of throw it back at you. So
I got one more question for
go
you,
ahead, and then I'm flipping it to you.
Flip it to me. I know you got to run pretty soon. So,
okay.
Talking about franchising, give us like 3 factors, like maybe 3 key factors that come to mind that a business needs to have for it to be a good fit to become a franchise. Because I know not everything might work out in that model. So, what are 3 things that's like, hey, these indicators are pretty good that this could be something that we can franchise?
So first and foremost, I call it unit economics, right? So your 4-wall economics, is that business profitable, right? And I can't tell you how many times, and me, you've spoken about this, part of my career, 20 years, I also consulted for a while. And part of my consulting was having businesses, prepping them to become a franchisor, right? And I would tell you 90% of the time, I got to a point where I was like, hey, you guys are not ready, right? So first and foremost is, number one, is the 4-wall economics, are you profitable? You're making money? Because if you're not, you need to fix that first before you even think about trying to scale this as a franchise system, right? And too many people make that mistake. They think they're going to make money on the franchisees, and that's how they're going to get rich, versus figuring out your box, making sure that your 4 walls work and your box works for that. The second thing is the scalability. So is your business scalable, meaning not just in your geographic? So you may be super successful, Mike, in Philadelphia, in Buffalo, in New Jersey, wherever we're at, we may be successful, but can I scale that to adjacent markets to let's just start for the first 6 or 7 states around me? Can I get to that scale, right? So doing testing to make sure, am I good outside of my four walls, right? So from that perspective. And then the third thing I think is, as a business owner, it is critical. Are you ready to mentally, physically, emotionally go through being a franchisor? And what I mean by that, Mike, is you have a daughter, I have kids. It's like giving your kid to somebody to raise, right? Are you ready mentally for that, physically, mentally, emotionally? Because you built this business. I don't care if it starts with 3 or 4 restaurants or a service business or a gym, and then you're starting to franchise it. Someone else is running your business and has your name on the door, if you will. Are you ready?
It's like other people raising your kid.
Totally. That's what I say. It's the same thing. And people like laugh when they hear me say that, but I can't tell you how many times that you have, and I've seen it, and there's some really good franchisors out there that just can't scale. They're never going to pass 20 units, 10 units, 15 units, because they're just they micromanage and they're so fearful of growth. And part of it is, do you have the mindset to make sure that your system can grow? Did you build the right system that you feel strong enough and confident enough that you can grow, through that process? But to me, it's those 3 things. If you don't have those 3 things, and it starts with finances, it has to be profitable. You will not be successful.
You know what it makes me think of is being the difference of being a parent and being a teacher. Like a teacher could have 30 students or more in their class, or if it's a college professor, they might have a couple hundred people in their class. But, they're teaching, and then they want to go see that those people apply it out in the real world, right? And you want to do that with your kid too, but with your kid, it's a different love and care. It's every little thing. They scrape their knee. You're there with a Band-Aid. You're fixing every little problem intricately. There's a relationship. There's love. There's tough love. There's, what's the word when they could do something wrong, you still love them? Unconditional love.
Unconditional.
So, yeah, it's a totally different thing. And that's kind of how, personally I feel with my business right now. But I gotta, and I'm not even talking, I didn't ask the question really talking about Social Chameleon, but it was something you and I talked about off camera a couple months ago. But just good for people who are tuning in right now that have a business. They're thinking about starting one, or they're already doing well in business. They're looking to scale. And maybe that little seed was planted in their brain. Like, is this something that I can become a franchisor and have multiple locations where we do everything the same at all of them and deliver that great customer experience? So just kind of planting the seed for anyone who's tuning in what's possible for their company. So those 3 things are obviously the key elements. If you feel you have those 3 things, then you can start to have that next conversation.
Correct.
Which we can talk about maybe another time. All right, you got something for me planned?
I do. So to switch gears, and let's throw it back on you, Mikey, and kind of get your perspective, right? So what I'll say is, you've been podcasting for many years, but we'll kind of say that the last 5 years, how has podcasting kind of changed your life? And if you can give kind of 3 examples of how it's changed your life over the past 5 years? I would say, and break it up kind of professionally, if it's helped you and how it's helped you, and then personally.
Yeah. Appreciate that. That's awesome. Honestly, it's crazy, first of all, that it's been 5 years, a little bit over that actually. And it's hard to imagine life without it. It's just become such a staple in my everyday life, listening to podcasts as a consumer, but also creator and as an executive producer for my clients. So it's weird to even imagine a world without podcasting, but we had it not too long ago. In the last 5 years, I've met over 200 entrepreneurs that have been on the show, and I just pick their brain. They share their stories. And really the idea of that inception was, I was already having conversations with people like you over coffee. And I love to get to know people and really understand what makes them tick and how they got to their growth, and how can I learn from them. And so that's how the show really became what it is. And then I just decided to record them and launch the podcast. So really one of the big benefits was your question, what 3 things have really come out of me putting this effort out there, is I got over 200 people now in my connections and network. You talked about the importance of going out and doing stuff. I've been able to really foster that through the show, and many of them become friends, people I love to get lunch with. And sometimes I do when they're in town, or if I'm going near where they're hanging out, I meet up with them. Dozens of them out of the 200 people I mentioned, have paid us for a service or became a long time. Many of them are recurring clients and great friends. A lot of my clients are people who I talk to as, I'd love to hang with these people. So
for sure,
that came naturally, unexpectedly, and unplanned from podcasting. The second thing is I turned my passion into a profitable business. And it didn't happen initially. It was over time, it was growing. But I'll say this, I fell in love with podcasting. And if I didn't, it wouldn't have worked, because the first 2 years I was in business in 2017 and 18 for myself, when I left corporate and started Social Chameleon, we were trying to do all these different things and it got a little convoluted. And I fell out of love with it. And how are you going to be successful and do something really well if you kind of felt oh no, I started this thing because I wanted to be fulfilled and now it's not there. And then podcasting was separate from Social Chameleon. And that's the thing that really was driving me. And I got up every day with more excitement to do a free podcast for someone that I wasn't going to make any money than trying to sell a service that I wasn't even happy to fulfill. So that's the second thing. I turned this into my passion project into a growing business, and the way that
I could hit pause for 1 second, Mike, because this is important for the audience.
Yeah.
One I take away is you got the reps, right? Folks, you need the reps in the business, right? So you might have not been profitable, but you're profitable in the sense of you're getting the reps. But the second thing is, I want to ask the question is, when did it flip to you? When did it flip where it became profitable, and why do you think it flipped and became profitable? So how many years into it, and then, what do you think kind of helped?
Initially it was just helping people, teach them how to do it. But the first thing was, man, you got this cool show, teach me how to do it. And so I did that for a little while and it made very little money, but it was reps. It was teaching people how to do it. It was building systems. Then I started to have some, a presentation about podcasting. I was doing some webinars and teaching people how to do it. Then quickly I realized people don't want to learn how to do it. A lot of the entrepreneurs and businesses, the B2B style I was going for, they didn't want to learn how to do it. They wanted it done for them. And really, once I learned that and what our true value was and our value proposition, that's when it became way more profitable. I was able to ask more. And it's not just raise the price because we can. It was because our value was actually even higher than I felt we were even asking. And it's true. We continued to properly scale the price based on what we were offering and what the market called for. And I think still we're highly affordable compared to a lot of our competitors and what we provide. That's when it really changes, when it's it's a game changer. It's a white glove service. You press record, we handle the rest.
For sure. So I want to make sure everyone gets this, because it's really important. And this is a really good thing that Mike did, guys, is he pivoted his business, right? So where he started is not where he is today. And I just want to call that out for, new franchisee, new entrepreneurs, new business owners, even if you are working for somebody as well, right? And you're going down the wrong road or the wrong rabbit hole. I don't say the wrong one, but you're going down a road that you need to pivot. I think it's great, Mike, that you call that out, because that's super important, because I think folks, they don't want to. They feel like, hey, I've committed so much or so much money or time or effort here, I can't pivot, right? I have to go down this road because there's a commitment. It's like, hold on a second, like you did a great thing. Like, oh, this is where the value is. This is where the market's going for me. This is where I can provide value and make more money. This is where I need to go.
It's interesting because I chose to pivot and just really follow my heart on that. But I really decided, like, this is something I want to do. I enjoy doing it. But I also saw the money, the profitability in it was changing compared to where we were with the other projects. I was, in many cases, working long, hard hours, 6 months into a project before I even got paid.
Right.
And then I had to, obviously shell it out to everyone involved in the project. And if I had enough to give myself, breakfast, lunch, and dinner that day, felt like a champ. But then I realized, okay, this is not going to be something that I can scale. I want to go back to your first question though. You asked me like the 3 things that really benefited me from podcasting as long as I've been doing it now. And number 1, I mentioned connections. Number 2, I talked about building a profitable business around it, which, had happened kind of by accident, which is cool. And then 3rd would really be learning from people directly. I love to read books, but books, you can't ask them a follow-up question. You can't say, wait a minute, tell me more about that story. How the heck did you really do that? Because they're getting on to the next point, the next chapter. And you're like, this is really what I need to learn more about. And a YouTube video is great. And there's comments, and you might get the creator to comment you back, but you're not having an active and engaging conversation. And podcasting for me, it's just been a great way to meet people who are levels ahead of myself, who are willing to, in a mentorship style role, talk to me in the audience. And I'm over here taking notes. And a lot of times when the episodes release, I go back. I don't necessarily like to watch myself again or whatever, but I'll go back and be like, man, this is really good, and
yeah,
like just relearn some of the stuff over and over again. So I have basically like a database of all this great information, and I do have I have it in my heart that I want to turn that into a book at some point. I think it'd be great. Like, take the common denominators from a lot of the guests that we have on the show. Now that you're involved in the show too, you'd be a part of this. Take the common denominators. There's going to be the marketing and branding stories, the startup stories, the scaling from X to Y stories, the crash and burn, more entertainment, people who are in sports, but they're doing high performance. We'll have different categories, and then like those categories can become chapters. And I think the whole idea is if someone reads this book, they're going to get knowledge from like over 200 mentors packed into a ridiculous book. So you're not just getting one voice the whole time you're reading it. You're kind of getting all these different perspectives, but the themes and a lot of the points, no surprise, you look at successful person A and B, and there's a ton of common denominators.
For sure. No, I agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
I'm reading a book right now, Napoleon Hill, as you know, I like to read, but the chapter now is all about failures, and the whole focus is just, it's a temporary failure, right? It's not a long-term failure. Can't sit in it, but it's funny, he talks about it almost as a superpower, like, right, if you haven't failed, you haven't done anything, right? And it's kind of weird in our society, and it's funny, this book I think was written in don't quote me, but I think it was 1920s.
It's like 100 years old. It's really
100 years old.
Yeah.
And he's talking then how society, failure is a bad word in society back then. And he goes, and back then he's writing saying it shouldn't be. I don't know why people think it is. Like, again, I don't want to, think of Edison, Ford, pick somebody, Rockefeller back in the day. How many failures they've had to get to that one moment, right? Elon Musk today, how many rockets get blown up before you get to that one moment? Right. So it's just, to me, again, not trying to fail, of course, that's a different conversation, but it's part of the process.
Yeah. And I had this conversation with someone a couple episodes ago where imagine if we gave up after the first time we tried something and it didn't work out. We would never drive a bike or ride a bike. We would never drive a car. We would never start a business. Like we
never
we
have
would give
sex.
up. Yeah. Relationships. The first time something goes bad, you don't just give up. I'm never going to talk to this person again. Like, you work on it. There's many failures within something. As a salesperson, the best salesperson's average is not 100%. The best baseball player's batting average is not 100%, or it's 333 batting average is good. Like, 1 out of 3 times you hit the ball and someone doesn't catch it, you're freaking all-star. You're gold, you're gold glove if you make less than this amount of errors. But people are making errors. They're failing, but they're out there playing. So I think reps are super important. I think there needs to be something that you can have a metric so you understand. You don't want to just be out there just like the baseball player, just swinging your bat. You got to improve your stance over time and have something to track it, because if you don't know what your batting average is, maybe you played a whole season, you're like, I don't know, did I do pretty good? We won some games, and I think I hit a couple home runs at key moments, but you have no idea because you didn't track it. Well, how are you going to get better in the off season? So I think it's important for people. Like, the thing I'm taking out of this conversation right now is reps, having a metric that you can follow, just like all the businesses that you're talking about, or all of the Ford's locations, I should say, within the business framework, have the same KPIs, the key performance indicators, and the net promoter scores, because you have something you're solving for. And in business or in life, you want to track that stuff. It doesn't always, it's not, it's like the accounting side of things that I don't always like. I'm more of a creative, someone has an idea.
Creative.
But it's important to make sure you have that other stuff taken care of, because creativity is great, but you got to get it on track and mold it into a way that it can become something.
Yep, 100%. Well said.
Yeah. So is there anything else? I know you got to run in a minute. Anything you wanted to talk about? You've been away for a little while. I got to get you scheduled up with we have a ton of interviews scheduled. I just did 2 earlier today that were really great. Anything else you want to share or you're excited about? Anything coming up?
I'm just excited. I will tell you, last thing for everyone is I'm just excited about the future, right? Regardless of folks' political views, and it really doesn't matter. I will tell you that the last few conferences I've gone to, and one of them specifically was a finance conference. Everyone is optimistic, right, about the future and about, Q3, Q4 of this year, and then coming into the future years. Yes, there's some bumpy kind of things we need to clean up now in the short term, certainly, but optimism is the word, versus I'll tell you last year, or probably the last 2 years, although folks were grinding and hustling as a business owners in the conferences I went to, everyone was cheerful. The word optimism or the optimistic words weren't being used. Now they are being used. So for everyone who's out there kind of grinding, hustling, just keep doing what you're doing. Don't give up, because they think that we're going to see a good run and opportunities. If you got to be in the game, right? So I'll tell you, you don't get the opportunity if you're not in the game. So stay in the game.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. The other thing I was thinking about to go back to the last topic, kind of put like an exclamation point on it, is anybody who's great at what they're doing right now, the reason that they got to where they're at, being great at it, is that they never gave up, right? So the one common denominator, I keep using that as a term, but like the one thing in common about everybody who's a failure, period, is that they gave up, right? Failing is something that successful people do all the time, but it's an action word. They're failing. They didn't fail. They're failing, and then they're going to continue to move on. So, Jordan, all the shots he's taken that he's missed, fail, game winner. And so what do we remember him for? The ones that went in. Same thing. Yeah. Same thing with business. So, closing a deal, getting told no 10 times in a row, figuring out why, fixing it, getting better, fixing your stance, your batting stance, and then just, continuing to move forward, like you said. I think that's super important. So I just want you to know, man, I'm grateful for you. Likewise. Being a friend, being in my network, being a co-host. I want to get you on more episodes. I think people will enjoy your perspective as well as mine. They're probably sick of hearing me talk. So get some additional questions coming in from your side of the table. And just really greatly appreciate you. I don't have my BGBG mug. I'm rocking out some sparkling ginger water. I'm on this is actually something I can get on the show. So as we record this, it is March 6th right now. So I started on the 3rd, a 6-month challenge to lose 50 pounds. So I'm wiping out like sugar as much as I can, all the sugary drinks and stuff. Didn't really drink a lot of that anyway, but so I'm only drinking water, keeping it really clean, coconut water, whatever, maybe a little flavor. And yeah, I'm at a spot right now where I'm 39 and I want to be healthier on my 40th birthday than I was really on my 30th. I've been working out in the gym and doing stuff. I got derailed in February, as you know, because I had this horrible flu, 3 days with over 100 fever. Nothing was working. Medicine wasn't working. It finally went away. Then I got like the worst sinus infection ever. It was lingering. I'm still coughing, throughout the day. But I'm finally able to get back in the gym and increase my steps. I'm going to finally get to this level of 10,000 steps a day. I know that's not news for anybody. Everybody knows 10,000 steps a day, but like actually doing that, drink water intake and cutting out processed foods and stuff. 50 pounds, 6 months. My buddy, we got some money on the line. He
do it.
So let's roll. So I'll keep you posted on that as well.
No, that's awesome, man. It's super. Listen, supportive. I love it. I love the journey, Mike, and obviously always here to support you.
We love our businesses, but we also love our families, and that's what drives what we do. And how do you love your family if you're saying, I'm not going to be the best version of myself? And right now I know health-wise, I'm not the best version of myself. So I'm actually letting Isabel down when I'm not being in peak state. So I'm not saying I need to be a bodybuilder, but I need to be someone who can really be there for her as long as possible. And to do that, you got to be healthy.
For sure.
So,
well said.
And hey, let's get you on the pickleball court with me soon. Mano y mano.
Let's do it.
And we'll record it and put it in the podcast. All right, man. Grateful for you. I promise to get you out of here on time. So love you and enjoy the rest of your day. Be great.
Likewise.
Be grateful, dude. Cheers.
Keep